How old are you when The Alchemist comes into your life?
18.
Who tells you about the book?
I go and visit my family in Florida, and my uncle and I start talking, and I don't remember exactly how it came about, but he knew that I was like truly suffering. When I came back to the States from Nicaragua, I was bullied a lot. The walls were like closing in on me. And he was just like, I think you need to read this because it helped me a lot when I was trying to figure out who I was. He understood without me having to tell him what was going on. I don't think anybody else maybe really saw me besides him.
Welcome to the Syndicate X Library, where we love books. And today we are talking about a book that changed somebody's life, Julia Johnston. She's an incredible human being. I found that I had a lot in common with her in the sense that she grew up in a foreign country as a kid. She is a singer, multi-talented person, beauty pageant queen, and much, much more. The conversation is something you're going to take a lot away from. The book that changed her life is The Alchemist. What do you think of the library?
I'm obsessed. I literally want to like camp in one of the aisles and just take it in. I would never leave.
You're always welcome to come and dig in. There's a lot of different categories.
Oh, don't tempt me with a good time, because I will. The magic section.
How many books a year do you read?
That is a great question. I would say if I can average 3 a month. Yeah,
Wow.
but it's not like all nonfiction, all fiction. It can be like, I just finished The War of Art, which is like a very small book.
Great, though.
So I just try and like keep moving through them. But some take longer. Sometimes it's like literally 1.5 a month because the subject matter, it takes longer to like digest.
Always reading, never Audible?
Oh no Audible. I can't do Audible.
How do you highlight?
I write in the book. So like literally all of my books have my notes. And I used to be embarrassed about it because it's like you give someone a book, then you're like sharing part of your soul because you've written what you think about it. But I'm like, well, that's why we're here. So.
Oh, you learn a lot about a person.
Oh, yeah.
That way.
Yeah, you do.
And you also can learn a perspective on a book that you wouldn't have had. Like sometimes when I'm looking at other people's notes, I'm like, I wouldn't have thought of it that way.
Right. I think that's the best part of it too.
It makes it more alive, I think, in that way. So that's a lot. That's more than I read. That's
really
pretty good.
How many do you read?
Maybe 1 a month. I mean, It depends. Things come in seasons, but also sometimes I'll read sections of books if I'm working on something where I'll go to the part of the book that is serving the need and I won't read it cover to cover.
Yeah.
So it depends. Do you feel obligated to finish a book if you start one? Me neither.
Half of my books are unfinished. I have books stored all over the world. So I lived in London for 3 years and I left a bunch of books in London with like random friends. Half of them are unfinished. I don't know if I'll ever see those books again. At my mom's house in Florida, same thing. Books everywhere, not even finished.
So
but
how
my
many
favorites,
are in London?
I don't even want to know because I'm sure my friends are like, this girl, like, how long are we gonna have these books? But there's a lot because I came and went a few different times and books are the heaviest thing to carry. And it always gives me a reason to like go back if I leave stuff, which I don't know, psychologically, maybe there's something to that. But the most important books never leave me. I will pay the extra weight for the suitcase.
How many are in that?
There's probably 10 to 12. I would say right now 10 because I give them away. Okay, so right now, I always confuse the words. Think Poor, Grow Rich, or one of those.
Think and Grow Rich?
Yeah, Think and Grow Rich. I never know the name, but it always comes with me. I have The Alchemist, of course. I have, I think, 2 Nancy Drew books because I read the whole series as a child multiple times. I have, which ones did I bring with me this time? The War of Art obviously is now with me, and I'll probably continue to carry that one. Someone just gave me a book on anarchy that I've started reading. That will probably come with me for the next year. But there's a few. I don't remember which ones I brought back from London this time, but they've stayed.
The War of Art, when I read it the first time, I immediately read it again. I did the same thing with your book today, The Alchemist.
Oh, yeah?
I immediately read it again, yeah.
Oh, it's a good one.
It is.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about where you grew up.
Okay, so I was born in North Carolina, and then I moved at like 2 years old to Baltimore for a few years. Then I moved to Nicaragua, and I lived there for a few years. And then I came back to the States, lived in North Carolina. Then when I was 17, I went to New York. And then I came to LA, and then I was in Medellin for a little bit, like on and off a year. Then I went to London for 3. I was back in the States a few times, but I was mostly in London. And then I just came back to LA about a year ago. So not really one place, but I would say I live in a spectrum between North Carolina and Nicaragua. Those are like my 2.
You would call those home, or you'd consider them home?
Yeah, I think North Carolina probably is the most home because I spent the most time there. But I think Nicaragua had such a profound impact on me as a child. And then I also randomly discovered I had this whole Nicaraguan family because when we moved there, if you have Latin family, everyone is your cousin. Like suddenly you have 100 cousins. And as a kid, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And so we're married into a Nicaraguan family. And when I moved there, my mom was like, these are all your cousins. I was like, what? So I think that was more than even blood family. Like that was so crucial to my development. And my mom lived there when she was a young adult. And the rest of my family was there too. So it's like this weird, I could never claim being Nicaraguan, but I'm so happy there. I can't go back now because of the political part, but I love that place. And my family, I'm very close with them. So
How many siblings did you have?
I have 3 half siblings. They didn't go.
Well, how old are you when you go to Nicaragua?
I moved on my 9th birthday.
And so do you go to school there?
I did.
How was that?
Oh, it was amazing. I learned Spanish. My mom always spoke Spanish when I was growing up, but I didn't know what she was saying. When I moved there, I immediately learned Spanish in like maybe a month and a half. Because when you're a kid, you retain everything. And I was in 2 different schools. I've never been more free, ever. My mom once tried to hire a driver to take me back and forth from school to home. I ran away from him, and I went and decided to go train horses in the fields with my friend.
And you're like 10 or 11 when you're doing
I
this?
was 10, yeah.
So when you say never been more free, describe what free means in that sentence.
I think the human spirit is ultimately very free. When you're a kid, you don't know what no means until someone tells you. You just think, well, this is really cool. This feels like love. This feels like what I should do. I mean, there's obviously like when we misbehave, but there's a freedom to that where the world is just open and you're like, this is so cool. I should go try that. And there, because my mother was, she was a Peace Corps director, so she was like extremely busy. And my dad is, he's very white, so he doesn't speak Spanish, and he was like doing his own thing. I was just like left essentially a lot of the time to my own devices. And so I had this whole new world to just discover. And I was lucky because I was in the embassy, so I was protected. Like, my house had like 25-foot gates around it. We had a guard at night. We had guards during the day, all these things. But I could just go. When I went in the afternoon after school to be where my horses were, I was free. No one ever was like, oh, you should be this when you grow up. Oh, you can't be that when you grow up. I thought I could be anything. I was a free person. I had other things, obviously, like my dad was very strict, but besides him, I was like, wow, the world is so cool. The world is infinite possibilities. And then obviously when you grow up and came back to the States, I was like, what? Like, there's so much pressure. There's so much social pressure. Everyone thinks you have to be this or this. This is crazy. So that was what free was.
So how do you navigate that now that you're here?
I think if anything, I've returned more to my child self now because I realize like it doesn't matter. You're on this planet for a finite amount of time. So if you're going to live your life within the paradigm of, oh, I'm supposed to be this, you're going to have a hard time because it's never going to resonate, I think, for myself with my soul. So I think for me, if I feel something come to me and it feels like divine inspiration, I will just go do that thing. I don't care if I don't have the money, I will find the money, whatever. And The Alchemist was a big part of how that started to happen. Because when I came back to the States from Nicaragua, I was bullied a lot. I was very anxious as a child. And the walls were like closing in on me. And I was like, this is insane. I went to school in New York. Same thing happened. I almost failed out 3 times because I was like, none of this feels right, but I'm supposed to do it. And then the discovery process for the last like 8-9 years has been about finding freedom again on a soul level, on a deeply connected to something bigger than myself level. I'm still doing it. I'm not like fully there, but I just think if I was to pass away today, would I be upset and why? Would I be okay with it because I did the things that came to me and I feel like I contributed in a loving way to others, which is a work in progress always? Or would I be like, damn, I did not use my time well?
How old are you when The Alchemist comes into your life?
18.
18? When you came back from Nicaragua, how many different schools did you go to? Like, how many times did you move?
So after Nicaragua, I was in 3 or 4 different schools up until I went to college.
So, if I'm doing the math right, when you came back, you were 12 or 13?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's you're becoming a teenager.
Yeah.
Body's changing, hormones, lots of
Questions.
weird feelings. Yeah. And so you said bullied, but why do you think you didn't fit in? Was it?
It was the freedom. It was
you didn't
literally
want to
that.
conform?
No, it was, I didn't know what that meant. So if you come from being in an environment where like, I ran around pretending I was a horse, like when I was in middle school, because I didn't know that was wrong. I was like, this is fun. This is what I love horses. I love being free. I love running around. Cool. Freedom. You come back to the US and all of a sudden I was in a middle school and my family didn't have very much money. So my parents sent me to a private Christian school. And, they were like, this will be the best thing for her. And realistically, probably it was. But we didn't have a lot of money. So I learned at that time, because we had money in Nicaragua. We had this great life, but then we lost it. And I didn't care about that because those things didn't mean anything to me. But when we came back, it meant something to other people. Right? So I became embarrassed of where I lived. I didn't want people to see my house. I became embarrassed that we had this car that, it was tiny. Like these things that didn't actually have meaning suddenly had meaning. And also I wore oversized t-shirts to school every day because I thought that was cool. I continued to run around like a horse because I thought that was cool. Nobody else did. So I started getting made fun of. And that became this internalized self-hatred of like, why can't I just be cool? And that persisted through high school because it was the same thing. Like, I'm in the South. It's beauty pageants. It's Southern Bells. It's cotillion. And I'm like, what? Like, that seems like boring as hell. Mind you, I just ran for Miss California 3 weeks ago. But that was more of like a resolution to self. But yeah, so I just didn't understand. And then when you do realize the world is, kids are cruel, you're like, shit.
I want to ask how religion played into that, but there's something we have in common in the sense that I grew up a missionary's kid in Mexico.
Wow.
And then same thing when I came back, I was around 13.
Yeah.
I, of course, didn't fit in. It was a huge
Yeah.
culture shock. A lot of similar experiences. But the thing I think that stuck with me most, and I'm going to bet that you're going to agree with this, is that I noticed very early on when American kids would come down to Mexico in youth groups to do different missionary work or volunteer, that the kids in Mexico that lived in a cardboard shack that had nothing were happier than the kids that had everything I thought I wanted.
Right.
Right? Because I never fit in. I was like you said, the kid in Mexico that would have been considered rich, even though we were poor, but we had more. And also we were Americans, which people aspired to come to America and the opportunity and all of that. And so I always felt very lucky in the sense that I noticed that juxtaposition or that contradiction, that the people that had everything were miserable and the people that had nothing actually had more substance and they valued family more and connection. And yeah. So I relate to that. How did religion play into your growing up? Because they made me go to Christian school too.
Well, I had a triple whammy because my dad was a pastor.
Oh, so you're a PK.
I'm a PK.
So I was a PKMK.
Okay. So you had it all.
Yeah.
Yes. So you know the drill. So I was a PK. My mom was Catholic. So before we moved, I grew up going to a convent with my mom, or a monastery, and then going to my dad's church. Because my mom is now Presbyterian, but at the time she still was very connected with a Carmelite monastery. So I'd go with her, see the girls, the nuns, and then I'd go to my dad's church. So when I came back to the South, I mean, my second high school was Southern Baptist. So that was like a whole other can of worms. But I was in Catholic schools, missionary schools, Presbyterian schools. I was in every kind of religious school, but I never was satisfied with the answers that I got, because I think I always wondered, like, how is it that God is so far away and yet everything is so close? Like, why, when I'm in school, are they talking about God like God is so far from us, when God is literally, and I see this now, maybe I couldn't verbalize it as a child, but like, I see God in nature. I see God in the horses that I was around. I see God in people. God is literally, to me, everywhere. And I think maybe that's why freedom was so tangible as a kid, because God was right there. And so this teaching of like, oh, well, God's going to strike you down. Like, God is mad at you, blah, 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 blah. It's like, what? Like, how are you going to tell me that everything is love? Jesus taught love, and yet you're telling me like all this stuff. So it was
it's hard
interesting.
to monetize something if you don't have
Right. Well,
hell, right?
There you go. And I think hell is very much also present in the human state now. I think, like, I don't know what's after death personally, but I haven't died yet. But I think that hell is also something you can experience within the own mind living on earth.
So you're 17 or 18. You've kind of gone through this experience where you feel like you don't fit in, right? You've been bullied. What else is going on in your life before this?
Oh my God.
Comes.
Oh my God. Was a mess. So that book. So I've had anxiety, not so much anymore since I was 5. I started having panic attacks at that time, and they persisted when I came back to the States. So that book, I was in college. I was 17 when I went to New York. I didn't want to go to college, but my parents were like, well, you have to because you're underage. So I got 2 scholarships into a Christian school.
What are you going to college for?
I wanted to be an actress.
Okay.
So I don't even know what I was going to college for. My degree was liberal arts, but it was like, I was like, well, if this is what I have to do to be in New York, fine. So my course curriculum was all like Socratic logic, theology 2. My saving grace was film class because I love film. So it was film theory, study of, history of film, blah, blah, blah. But everything else, I was like, what am I, like, why am I here? Like, seriously, why am I here? But I had 2 scholarships. I almost failed out 3 times. And my dad had just turned 70 something when that book came into my hands. And so I was like freaking out. I was like, oh my gosh, like, is this really life? Truly, because I can't do this shit.
Who tells you about the book?
My uncle. So my uncle who's married to the Nicaraguan woman. So he and I have always been very close. He's a very gentle soul. And when other people were trying to get me, I was put on medication for anxiety and depression, and I was put on Adderall because they thought the Adderall would keep me in school and not lose my scholarships. The anxiety medication would keep me from having panic attacks. And they thought I had depression. I did not have depression. I had anxiety, and I hated school because I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I was too scared to do anything about it because I didn't know. So my uncle, I go and visit my family in Florida. And my uncle and I start talking, and I don't remember exactly how it came about, but he knew that I was like truly suffering because what I wanted was here and what I thought I had to do was here, but right here was killing me. Like,
what is what you wanted?
Once again, freedom to go on my path, which was for me at the time, I thought acting, I didn't know what it looked like, but I just knew that what was happening wasn't right. But as you know, when you're in an environment like a Christian environment, and I'm Christian, I believe in God still. Like I don't go to church because I have my own thoughts about church, but I truly believe in the higher power. But I felt so disconnected because I was like, oh, I have to be in school. I have to take these classes. I have to do this. I have to become this. I had a boyfriend at the time who was extremely religious. I have to be with him. I was literally dying. Like all that, like the Adderall with the anti-anxiety, all of it was like literally killing me. But my parents were like, okay, well, this isn't good. Well, what the hell? So my uncle gave me this book and he was just like, I think you need to read this because it helped me a lot when I was trying to figure out who I was. Or he said something to that extent. So he just gave me this
Uncle on your father's side or your
my mom? So my mom's brother, the youngest brother.
Youngest?
And ironically,
What does he do?
He is now a therapist.
Okay.
And he's absolutely the most amazing. Like he worked in a big corporate I think he worked for some corporation, but like big, that type of job. And he left because it wasn't right. It didn't resonate with him. And now he's a therapist.
Went to school and
but he understood without me having to tell him what was going on. And I think I don't think anybody else maybe really saw me at the time besides him. I don't think anybody could see
everybody else was reacting to the symptoms, not the cause.
They were like, you're failing. Like, I'm not a failure at all. We all fail, but I don't believe anybody is a failure. I think people that are failing are just in the wrong equation. It doesn't make sense. People are not failures, but he gave me this book and
you felt like he really saw you.
Yeah. I don't think I recognized it at the time because I think I was living in hell. So I didn't know. All I knew was the cycle of panic. And I went off all my medication, but I didn't tell my parents because I was like, this shit's going to eat me up. So I went off of everything. And then I was just like forcing my way through everything else. And
does he give you a physical copy?
Yeah. He gave me my first copy.
Okay.
And it had his notes in it.
Oh, it did?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's fast. That's another fascinating conversation. So when do you start reading it after he gives it to you?
I will be honest with you. I do not remember the exact time frame because a lot of that time I've kind of repressed. That part of my life doesn't even seem like it was real because now...
Was it when you got back to New York?
Back to New York.
How many books had you read up until that point?
A lot. I mean, I was
Isn't
reading
it
like,
interesting when you're the kid that doesn't fit in, you escape into books? Like I find like it's kind of an introverted thing. Like,
well, it's a safe space.
yeah,
And I think also when you don't understand your surroundings, other people's voices give context to what you're experiencing.
100%.
And I think that like that I loved film. I've always loved film and music, but it was the same reason because I didn't understand my surroundings and I felt like, well, I'm clearly not doing well out here because people don't seem to get me. But then you read a book or you see a film or you watch or listen to music and you're like, oh, how did they perfectly articulate how I feel? Same thing with books. And then you realize a lot of authors as well were actually experiencing that feeling of isolation. Look at Edgar Allan Poe, madman, but genius. And at the time, I would imagine like nobody got him. He probably was like, what? But his work has lived on, and there's a lot of people that can find so much beauty in that. It's incredible. Kanye's got a lot going on.
He's still a genius.
He's a genius. The internet is a blessing and a curse, I feel. And I feel like when I think about Kanye, I especially think about that. Because I wonder like how much of his genius, if it had just been left to a form of art, would have had all of the meaning it could have instead of
I don't think you
the
can
rest.
I don't think you can have one without the other. I don't think it exists.
You don't think so?
I think with a lot of great artists, it doesn't exist.
But there's a sacredness to their art that I think it won't tarnish with, like Van Gogh. Imagine if Van Gogh had a podcast. Oh my gosh.
It might not even be coherent.
Right, but that's my point. We would have, I think societally, we would have looked at Van Gogh and been like, oh God, this guy's crazy, blah, 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 blah.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure when he was drinking all that turpentine, we wouldn't have maybe wanted to know his thoughts. But his art would have remained what it is because we would just be like, this painting is incredible. This vision is incredible. It's like with Kanye, like you listen to his music, you're like, how did he arrange this? Like, this is insane, his videos. But then it's like now that in 2024, the 2000s, we've got like all the commentary, it tarnishes the beauty of the poetry of the work, I feel.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. If you just knew the art without everything else, it would kind of stand on its own.
Because you're right, artists, a lot of them, the great ones, are geniuses, but genius also comes at a price. We don't necessarily need to know that price. We just have to appreciate what they've given us.
So you read it when you get back home to New York. You don't remember how long in between?
I probably picked it up and put it down like 6 times.
You know, one thing is I've given this book away. I mean, literally, we've had just stacks of them. I've probably given it away a couple hundred times. The one thing about it is that it starts slow. A lot of people give up in that setup in the beginning because it really doesn't click until the midway point, and then you can't stop.
Right.
Once you hit that midway point, you can't put the book down, but there's a lot of grind kind of getting there that has to exist, but a lot of people give up during the grind, I find.
I think you have to be ready to read it. Truly, I feel like you have to be prepared.
So what made you ready?
Suffering, probably.
But you were suffering when he gave it to you.
No, I think
it got worse?
Yeah, I think that there's suffering, but then there's suffering with awareness, right? Sometimes I think we enjoy suffering because it gives life meaning, which is false, really, because I don't personally, at my ripe old age, don't think that human beings should suffer unnecessarily. I think suffering, if you want to put it in that term, is a part of growth, because if there wasn't pressure, we wouldn't grow. But endless suffering, just suffering for the sake of suffering, when you know you don't truly have to suffer, is self-gratifying. These are all I'm not saying this like this is the ultimate truth, but to me, I think there comes a point when you're ready, you've suffered enough, and you're like, what the fuck? How long am I going to live like this? Truly. Like, what am I up to? And you may not have the answer, but sometimes you just pick something up. And I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, that is how I got through that book. I know myself well enough to know that, like, it's the artist in me of being like, well, I'm a tortured artist. Girl, please stop. This is bullshit. That is not true. So I'm sure that's what led me to read this
So
book.
you picked it up, set it down a few times.
Yeah.
And then what happens when you actually engage? How long from the beginning to when you finished it, do you think?
I can't tell you the timetable, but I can tell you what happened. I'll never forget. So I was a junior in college. I forced my way through. I was like actually doing well in school because I realized I didn't like failing. I didn't like actually being that person I told myself I was, of like, oh, I'm an outcast, blah, blah. I naturally, we all are to some degree, but I didn't like it anymore. So I became
You
on
were
the
tired
dean's
of
list.
wearing that costume.
Yeah, what the hell? Like, to whose detriment but my own? So I got on the dean's list. I had a 3.88, I believe, GPA, something like that.
Intentionally or by accident?
Intentionally. Because I was pissed. I was like, I broke up with my boyfriend. He started dating my mentor. I was like, girl, no. So that.
Wait, how old was your boyfriend?
My boyfriend was 2 or 3 years older than me.
And how
My
old was
mentor
she?
was 2 or 3 years older than him. But she knew about the whole relationship. So she knew how I was struggling and blah, 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 blah.
And you guys are all Christians?
Uh-huh. But that's also why with the church, I was like, okay.
No premarital sex. You're saving
I don't know
yourself.
what they did, but I was.
He was.
As far as, that's what he told me, but I don't know what they were up to. And I was just like, okay, so if I'm seeing that this, I think subconsciously it was this thing of like, so I'm suffering for what? Like, I'm lovesick for what? I'm going through this for what? For who? And then I was like, you know what? I want to win for myself. I don't think I even had that conscious thought. I wasn't there consciously, but I was like, if I'm going to leave this school, why am I going to leave as a failure? If I'm going to have to bring my grades home to my parents, why am I going to come home as a failure? It's hurting nobody but me. So there was something that clicked and I got pissed off. I'm pretty sure, because I'm a Sagittarius. I'm a fire sign. So one of the quickest ways to get me to move is to piss me off. I was only mad at myself. So made the dean's list. Then I went in to renew my classes because I'd almost failed out so many times that I was now behind like a semester or two to graduate. And I was like, I did that to myself. So I went to my guidance counselor. I believe I was probably, if I hadn't finished this book, I was maybe halfway through. But I was starting to understand that idea of, if you want something, if there's something divinely in your face or in your mind, your only obligation is to show up. But I was still not ready to do that because I'd almost moved to LA like 3 times, but I was still not ready. I was like, oh, I can't, I have to finish. I can't, what am I going to do for a job? My parents are going to be mad, but my parents were actually starting to recognize like she needs to get out of this environment. It's not good for her. So I was ultimately the one in the way still. And I went to my guidance counselor and she said, okay, let's sign you up for these classes. And I was like signing up and I was thinking to myself like, oh God, another year of this. Like, I don't even want to graduate. No job that I want comes with this. This is like, for what, man? And she stopped me. We'd just gotten all the classes in the computer, but she stopped me and she goes, you don't want to be here, do you? I was like, actually, no, not at all. She's like, well, why are you here? I was like, because I'm supposed to. And she said, for who? Something like that. And I was like, it's the first time somebody had ever asked me, like, why are you here? Instead of good job for being here. She said, why are you here? I said, oh my God. And I left the summer, I think winter break started in a week. I never went back. Took my grades and left. That was it. I was out.
And so in that process, when do you finish the book?
I would say at that time. I think I finished and left about the same time. It all came
Christmas
together.
break?
Yeah. It all came together.
Okay, so when you're reading the book, what things do you remember kind of connecting with in the book?
The first time I read it, I think the only thing that I connected with was maktub, which is this idea of destiny. Like I think you read this book a few times and get something each time. That time, I think the state of where my consciousness was low. So I was only able to hang on to like one thing, which was basically this idea of like, okay, well, it'll work out. But that's it. That was it. That's all I had, right? And I believe I read it again when I got to LA.
Wait, so just the workout part. So that just gives you belief and a little faith in not putting so much pressure on yourself?
I was still putting pressure, but I think where my consciousness was is the only thing that I could hold on to was just try it, right? This like hesitant, like just try it. It's going to work out.
And does that inspire you to move to LA?
Yeah.
Okay.
That inspired me to follow the desire to the pyramid. So that was my pyramid at the time, was Los Angeles. But it wasn't much more evolved than that. I just knew, go to LA. I knew for a while this thought of go to LA, try it. I was too scared. But this idea of that being my pyramid was like, okay, that's enough.
So explain, because people haven't read the book, what the pyramid is in the book.
So the pyramids, I think, are many different things. But in this basic, simple scenario, the pyramid is just the boy believes the pyramids are where his treasure are. And he just has this, he just knows that that is where he needs to be, is the pyramids.
But he has to get there.
Right, but that's it. That's all he knew. Just like with me, all I knew was LA. I just knew LA. I didn't know what it was. I just knew my treasure and my pyramid. That was it.
And for the kid, there's wars, there's all kinds of things going on and obstacles.
It's incredible how spot on this book is, though, because similar to myself and everything I've undertaken, when you have the thought and you follow the thought, there's some luck that happens.
Give me an example of that in your life.
Every single thing I've decided to do has had this. I'll give you the most recent. I just ran for Miss California. I've never done a beauty pageant before. And that was like literally divine inspiration. Like, where would I get the idea? Especially when I grew up with all those girls that bullied me. They were beauty pageant. They were queens. They were not all of them, but they were like those girls that I thought were beauty pageant
queens. Is Queens a Beyonce reference?
Oh no, those queens are different, honey. But these were like beauty, you know, like the Barbies, you know. And I was wrong, I want to say, because the girls that I just ran with were absolutely incredible women. And any preconception I had of what a pageant girl was, I'm wrong for that. But I digress. So even to get back to the luck, so I decided to run, I don't have disposable income to throw into a beauty pageant. And it's expensive. It's all very expensive.
Like, how much would you spend to give it a good run?
I can't truly answer that because some of these girls, it's
What's
10,
the range?
it's like some girls spend like 20 grand because they hire a makeup team, they hire all these teams. I don't have that. And also I'm the type that like, I will learn how to do it. Like, why wouldn't, like, I'll do my own makeup. But there's certain things you can't compromise on. But anyway, I had a number in my mind. I'm not going to tell you what it was. And I was like, how am I going to do this? The last week of the pageant, before the pageant, I was like, I hadn't met my goal. And I was like hustling too. When I first started, someone gave me $1,000 out of nowhere. They just handed me an envelope with cash. Luck. But then you'll see with the book, the first lick of luck happens. Mine was someone gave me an envelope with $1,000. Someone else gave me $500, and I randomly got a coach. Like, these things fell into place right there to solidify the desire. So it was like, desire, I'm gonna do it, luck. That's the universe saying, go. Cool. But then after that, all these other things came up, and I started like having to spend that money that had been given to me. You know, like things fell apart, my dress, all these things. And I was like, shit. What? But I know now well enough, and I trust now that when I'm at my best enough to know that if the desire is given and the luck comes, there has to be something that tests you. Otherwise, it's not real. Sure enough, the week before the competition, once again, I was like, I'm still $1,000 off of my target. And I'm gonna have to figure that out because it's, to me, still like that's a lot of money I gotta make up. It's not like I'm just like, hey, yeah, someone Zells me $800 and someone else just out of nowhere goes, I want to pay for your dress, another 300. Someone else gave me like 200 after that every time. So that's just an easy example. That's just money. That's not, money is everywhere. But to the point, it always happens. It's like if the inspiration comes and you say, okay, cool, I'm going to follow that. The luck happens, the hardship happens, and then it goes on again. And that's literally the trajectory of this book.
And the pyramid in this analogy is you winning the pageant.
No, I didn't care about winning, but I wanted to compete. I wanted to compete.
You're competing in something you don't care about winning?
It was never about winning. No, it wasn't about participation and it wasn't about winning. I think winning is a nuance. It's like, what is winning to you? Winning to me was, I don't think I recognized it until after, but like I hadn't seen somebody that looked like me run for a beauty pageant. And honestly, to be real with you, when I grew up, that was the one thing I was like, you'll never be that. I was not like, I gained 40 pounds when I was like a freshman or sophomore in high school. I was kind of like a weird kid. I wore a yellow rain jacket every day, my like junior year of high school. I was super shy. I was not cool. And I saw all these girls around me like perfect, like beautiful, hair straightened, all the cool clothes. They drove a Mercedes. And I was literally like, I'm never going to be that. And that narrative that I said to myself as a teenager, I'm never going to be that, literally impacted so many of my decisions up until recently. Because that idea of I'm never going to be that meant that I was going to fail in school. Yeah, I wasn't happy, but also it's that narrative of, oh, I'm never going to be that, so I'm going to be this. I'm going to amp that up. I don't want people to think I'm this. And then the Miss California was literally me coming back to the core and being like, you know what? I am going to be this. I'm going to be whatever I want to be. And for any other girl that is like, oh, I can't be this. Yeah, you can. Yes, you can. You can literally be whatever and whoever you want. I have tattoos. I'm a curvier girl. I'm athletic. I can beat the shit out of someone because I've trained boxing, Muay Thai, and jiu-jitsu. Like all these things that made me think, well, I'm this, not that. What is that? And then you show up to the pageant and you realize like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. All of these girls are multifaceted. They're doctors. They're whatever. Like it's these things we create for ourselves, these paradigms. And so I think that to me was like so powerful of just being like, wow, I really thought I was all these things, or I thought I was special, or I thought I was this or that. You're just a human being. Just show up, just do the work.
So
enjoy.
In that scenario, how would you describe the pyramid? And if the goal isn't to win the pageant, what is the pyramid? The proving to yourself that you can be different things. You can be the thing that you thought you couldn't be.
I think the pyramid for me in this scenario was to master. I think, okay, if you'd asked me when I started, I think the pyramid would have been to get in the final 5 or to win. But realistically, I think what the pyramid was just to get further along in life in a place where I never would feel comfortable being. And take that discipline, that self-reflection, that knowledge, and then turn it into whatever's next. I think that truly was the pyramid. The pyramid was overcoming 15 years of thinking like, I can't do this. I'm not this. I'll never be this. That was truly the pyramid.
What was the pyramid when you moved to LA?
Becoming an actress.
Becoming an actress?
Mm-hmm.
How you said that the meanings changed over time. How have those meanings changed? The meanings in the book.
Well, ultimately, so the boy's after his treasure, right? But treasure is not so easily defined. And I think maybe the first time I read it, I saw treasure as a physical thing. The treasure is money, or the treasure is this or that. And I think as I become older, I recognize that treasure is really something much different. Yeah. So really, when he gets to the end of the book, he's reunited with the woman that he loves. And they've been separated these times. They don't know if they'll ever see each other again. But she says something to him to the extent of, well, I'll find you again. Like, it's this idea of fate. It's this idea of destiny. And there's a line in the book that's, where your treasure is, there's also your heart. So I think there's such a wealth of information in this book that takes on different meaning as you grow and as you're able to receive it. For me, treasure now has a different meaning than like becoming an actress and being successful. I've had a lot of money and I've had no money. I've been signed to a record deal. I've been unsigned to a record deal. I know people who are extremely successful, and I know people who couldn't care less if they're successful. And really, I think peace, it sounds so simple, but like peace of mind, peace of soul, peace of heart, and community are the treasure. That's why when he's reunited with the woman he loves, that is the most valuable treasure to him. He realizes he loves this woman, but he has to go on his journey to find his pyramid. You know, life is like, I was just reflecting on this a lot this week of like, we attach so much filler meaning, I think, to our identity, the egoic self of I am this, so I am that. I am successful, so I am this. I have money, so I am this. I'm a singer, so this means this. I have to dress a certain way. Who fucking cares? Are you happy? Truly. And I think when I read this book now, that stands out to me the most. It's this, you know, it's just this boy on a journey. What a gift is that? The journey of self-discovery. The freedom to discover yourself and to overcome the challenges and to always continue to go after this idea of what is your pyramid. That is truly the gift, I think.
What I've found with that, and I agree with what you're saying, is other people need you to make your identity easy for them to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Like they need you to say, I'm a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're not one thing, they, you know, like for me, for example, I can be an artist and I can be really good in business and I can be a bunch of different things. People can't put their head around that. The
No.
people that buy my business stuff need me to just be that, because if I'm an artist, that's too...
Makes them uncomfortable.
And they can't even wrap their head around the idea that they complement each other. Like really, you're way more well-rounded if you have a, you know, a more, just if you have more depth and understanding, and you're a better student if you're not just one thing, right?
I think it opens you up more to the experience of life just being life.
But you do run into people don't understand that, and you have to make it easy for them. They want you to be an actress. They want you to be
I think
a
sometimes
musician.
we make it harder for ourselves too, because I don't know about you, but I know there's been times where I don't feel safe with myself unless I can tell myself what I am. But ultimately that's once...
Explain that. You don't feel
like,
safe with yourself unless you can tell yourself what you are.
So like if you're
What's
going...
an example of what you are that you tell yourself?
Oh gosh, I think less so now, but I think when I was like at the peak of my anxiety, it was almost like the world seems really uncomfortable. I'm scared of the world, because ultimately anxiety is just like fear. So it's like, I don't feel comfortable. Okay, but who am I? I'm a singer. I live here. This is my boyfriend. This is what I'm doing. So it's like these little things, these details of like, who am I, that would like calm me in those moments of anxiety. Because it's like, well, at least there is meaning to why I'm going through this, because I'm a singer, right? So I don't know if that kind of answers that question, but now it's kind of like, I think the removing the fear and just being like, okay, well, I'm just here. I'm just having a human experience. These are the things I'm working for. These are the things that interest me and I feel love towards, that bring me joy. But if you asked me today, what do you do? I would have like 5 answers for you, and I would not be able to tell you how long I'll be doing them. But I am doing them. But I don't know where it's going. I don't need to know. So I think that's the shift, is like, I don't need to be this, and this to myself to make myself feel good about myself and the world.
I think my experience has been a little bit different with that, in the sense that I think about myself second. So I'll give you an example. Let's say public speaking. Like, I was afraid of public speaking. The way that I got over being afraid of it was not to focus on me, to focus on serving whoever I'm talking to.
Yeah.
And so it's the same sort of thing with anything that I do, is I try to find where the need is. And then what do I have that can authentically fill that need? But I'm secondary in the equation. Whenever I start thinking about, am I happy? Who am I? Like, I have a bunch of different things in my toolbox. If I find a place where I can add value, and then I'm trying to add value to that, so I don't put myself first in those thoughts, because if I put myself first, it becomes very lonely, and that's when anxiety and spinning of my mind starts to go, right? So if I'm like, back to the public speaking, if I'm thinking like, oh, they're not going to like me, or I'm not going to make sense, or I say too much, or if I start doing that, then I'm closing in on myself.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
It's all true. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? But if I say like, hey, I'm going to really prepare for this, and I know that I can offer them enough value through the and through the fact that maybe I'm not, the greatest speaker, but I put all the work into the value, the teaching and the lessons and the stories that I'm going to tell. I completely forget about myself. And then what happens is I find a community that I've added value to, and now I've added value and I have equity. And it was selfless.
Yeah.
You only get equity through being selfless. So in a sense, the thing that I've figured out is not thinking about me in that sense of just thinking about where's the need that I could authentically add value. There's a lot of needs that I'm not a super, extroverted, charismatic person, but I can teach and I can pay attention, and and so where can I serve others, and then I don't have anxiety. I get anxiety the other way, if that makes sense.
I think my crisis is more existential, right?
Explain.
Like, I think that my anxiety crisis was not about myself and the world. It was more about, what's the point of, like, it was a deeper thing of, who am I? What am I doing here? And what is the point? Maybe. So,
I mean, I think that that's where I started.
Yeah.
And then when I forgot about that, and I'm like, well, where out there can I just add value? Where are people needing something? And forget about how I feel.
But what if you do if you feel like you can't add value?
Oh, you can add value.
Right. But if there was a moment where you're like, I'm not needed here, would that...
Well, just the search for it will take you off of yourself. How long have we known each other? A couple hours? I can think of tons of places you can add value with your experience. I mean, just think about kids going to foreign countries. You also have this incredible ability that you're female, but very, very thoughtful and strong and open, like, in that way. And so there's a million places you can add. I mean, I'm sure just with acting, how many people out there could use your help with just their mindset with acting?
But that's the point, right? That's why it's like, if you're open to life will show you where you should be. And I think that is the point. It's like, you're here to experience what you experience. If you're going to suffer, you're going to suffer not pointlessly, because it will bring you to the next place if you let it, right? To give that back to somebody else. It's like, I think if you talk to a lot of therapists about like why they became a therapist, it's because they endured great suffering, or they were formerly an addict or something like that.
Yeah,
And
but that becomes I think that can also be a double-edged sword.
What do you mean?
Just a lot of therapists is continuity in a sense. Like,
I guess.
I feel like a lot of things can be fixed quicker than that. Let me give you another example and just tell me what you think. Okay, if you're a parent, right? How do you judge your parenting?
Depends on the parent.
No, just normally. Like, how
I mean, I
should a
think
parent judge how good they're doing as a parent? Do they judge it in themselves or in the kid?
Well, both, but in the kid. Yeah.
And is it a very rewarding thing to have a kid grow up to
I would
be
imagine.
happy?
Yeah.
Okay. Same example. If there's a need in the marketplace and you're giving yourself and you judge yourself on how you fulfill the need in others, it's way more rewarding than it is thinking about if you're happy or not.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes, 1,000%. But I don't
That's
think
been
a
my experience.
therapist.
What?
I don't think a therapist is judging themselves on how they're doing. Do you think they are?
Well, I think when we say therapist, we would have to qualify the different kinds, because there's some that are really good and there's some that aren't, and there's probably a bunch in the middle.
Sure, but that's
But
people.
therapy in
Yeah.
general can also be a crutch, in my experience.
Well, I guess I meant more so, I hear what you're saying. I guess I meant more so like back to the point of using what we go through in life to add value. So, there's people that run recovery houses and I'm not saying they're all perfect, because what human being is.
No, but they've experienced it, so they can relate.
Exactly.
And they have an architecture that helped them through that they can share. Yeah.
Right. And I think that also is kind of the for me is the point, is like, whenever I now go through something that I'm like, what is happening? Why is this happening? Doesn't feel great. I kind of try and look at it of like, well, how this goes, the roller coaster. Things are great, something happens. If you can just allow it to happen and kind of take it for what it is, then when you come out of it, it will have some positive or contribution or effect afterwards, if you can just take it for what it is. But I do, on the deepest level, agree with you that we're here to, I think, contribute back in to the pot of humanity, whatever we take and learn, and put it back in, whether it's public speaking. But I think sometimes it's not even on a big scale. I think sometimes it's just being around those that you know and love and becoming a better version of yourself. And I thought about this looking at like the year we have right now politically. We got a lot going on in this country. The world has a lot going on all over. I mean, I won't even get into that, but like, we got a lot going on in the world. And I think I was thinking about this. If we can take ourselves and say, okay, how can I become the highest vibration and the best version of myself that I can be? Take my lessons, learn them, stop resisting what I'm here to learn. How can I become and contribute better into even just my immediate circle? Because I know for myself, if I'm having a shit day or I'm going through something, which I go through many emotions, as I think we all do, but how is it that you can be going through this day, you see your friend, they're having a fantastic day, or maybe they're not, but they give you that 5 minutes of just light, of sunshine. And then all of a sudden your day is like so much better. Imagine if like as a human community, we just continue to do that to each other. Because I know that if I don't watch the news and I just exist like, and I have a very diverse group of friends, but if those people are well Even if they're going through something, which everybody is usually. But if their spirit is well, to me, the world is well. It's not. But like, we are stewards of each other. We're stewards of this planet. We need that. And that's to your point, which is beautiful. Like, how do I add value? How do I give something back? It's very powerful. And it makes me sad that, like, as a human community, like, we really are suffering. But there was something I saw or I read, and I know I'm probably rambling, but I have a friend. He is a fashion designer. He's amazing. And he was telling this story when he launched one of his collections. His collection was called For the Peace. And he began the collection with telling a story of his friend who is a Syrian refugee. And she said, and I hope I'm not butchering the story, but basically what she said is partying is an act of rebellion in Syria because anything could happen. A bomb could come down, but they're going to party through the time that they have and have the joy and the moments that they have. And I think that is so profound, right? It's the simplest act of rebellion to just, I believe those were his words, it's an act of rebellion to party, because if we're just together in that love and that vibration, that space, the world could fall down, but we are still there. We're still in that moment of love. And that is like, to me, it's amazing.
And in a sense, it comes back to the Alchemist. It is a form of rebellion to go after your pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
In a
Whatever
lot
it
of
may be.
situations, right? Because you're supposed to go to school, you're supposed
Yeah.
to climb the corporate ladder, you're supposed to do all these things, but oftentimes that doesn't fit who you are, right?
And truly, it that's why rereading it's funny every time, because it brings the question of what is happiness? What is that ultimate goal that you have? Is it really money? Probably not. Maybe. But what's really, what do you think the money will bring you? Friendship, community, safety, peace? It's never, I think, really what we think it is until we get there and we're like, oh, that the pyramid was something different. The treasure was something different. At the end, he's just with the girl that he loves because it was something different. And I think that openness to life and that truth with self of, hey, I actually don't know if this is what I want. I think I attached too much to that. Or maybe all of this wealth, whatever, is actually not making me happy. That humbling moment, and I've had it several times. And then just being like, wow, really all I want is to be in a fucking field of flowers with a horse, maybe with an iced coffee, with some kids, have kids one day. I don't need all this shit.
Do you have horses now?
No. And as you
How
can
many
tell,
horses-
I can't wait to have them again.
How many horses do you want?
Oh, I don't know. I think as many as I can make them feel loved and provided for, because horses are very sensitive and they get jealous. If they see you with their passion, like they're gonna be like, but yeah, I mean, I wanted to be like this famous singer for years, and then I dated someone who was very successful, and I was like, this shit looks miserable. Oh my God, you can't even leave your house and you're not happy. Not to say that there are some people that I know that are successful, they are happy. But I find that often the ones that I know like want to just chill out. Like they just want to have a moment of like, phone is in a ditch, like peace. And I think that's so beautiful. I'm like, take me somewhere where I can just like sit and, but I don't know how the universe, God, the higher power wants to use me in this life. And I don't know what that means yet. I'm just open to what it means. Treasure, pyramid is really, how can I be of service? How can I be helpful? Like you said, how do I find peace? Because I know when I'm peaceful and I'm in a state of love, I contribute the most probably to others.
So when you read the book, you saw yourself as the little boy?
I don't know if I really saw myself at the time. I guess. I think I was just in awe of the story. I don't know if I could see myself as anyone yet.
When I read it, I saw myself as the Alchemist. I didn't, and it was always odd to me when I would give it to people and we would talk about it.
Yeah.
you know how you just assume people
Yeah.
think like you do?
Yeah. Yes. Until you read the notes in the margins, you're like, whoa.
Because
Yeah.
I don't think that I'm pursuing happiness. I don't think I just don't, those sort of things just don't take up any space in my mind. Like, I feel like I can make things happen that I want to make happen.
Yeah.
And then it'll be a lot of work.
Oh,
But I also know that the older you get, the more resources you have, the quicker you can make things happen.
it's true.
And it feels like, there's an alchemy to it. But I don't feel like I'm chasing a pyramid in that way, I guess.
I think chase is an interesting word, right?
Yeah.
Because in life, everyone says don't chase, attract, but realistically, we're always kind of chasing, I think. Like, even if you're making something happen, there's an element I feel, or at least when I've made something happen, of like a push and a pull. There's like that go and that bring it back kind of thing. And I guess with the Alchemist, I guess he was chasing a pyramid, but I guess if I think about it, it feels like he was just searching more than chasing because he didn't know where he was going. He was just kind of like, it's going to be somewhere out there, but I know that the stones will tell me yes and no, and I know that somehow I'll get there.
Yeah. And I think that's a good way to approach things. I just think the older you get and the more journeys you've been on, you start to realize that when you get the pyramid, there really isn't this finality.
Yes.
And so the fun part is like you said, the motion, the going.
Yeah.
It isn't the arrival. And so you spend more time in the going and less time in I got the pyramid. Because when you get the pyramid, now you got the pyramid, what are you going to do?
Such a funny thing that you say that, because I think that's so true. And I think the older you get, the more the journey becomes the rich part. But I think, when I was talking earlier about suffering, I think for some, myself included, brings gratification. It gives a sense of purpose. I'm suffering for this. I'm fighting for this, right? I've got purpose. And then you kind of, I think through that, what you were just talking about, as you get older, you recognize, at least for myself, oh, suffering was just me trying to enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't actually have to suffer that way. I am not Vincent van Gogh. I'm not about to cut my ear off. But it's that idea of being in the in-between is actually, I think, where that wealth of knowledge and opportunity comes from, which is just uncomfortable.
And I think that the alchemist side of that is understanding that it's happening for you, not to you.
Oh, yes.
When you're suffering, a lot of times, that's the outcome of you externalizing control to something else, right?
Yeah.
And so when it's happening for you,
yes,
you're more in the middle of you're not celebrating too much and you're not, you're not attracting the pain too much. You're just kind of navigating the middle, more or less.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, I think now when I get in those in-between moments and now I feel like I have more and more every day, I'm just kind of like, I wonder what this plot twist will bring. But it is that faith. It's that trust that it's happening for you. I'm like, okay, well, clearly I thought I was doing something that maybe wasn't the best fit for me. So let's see what is really trying to happen for me. What's really trying to come through. It's it also reduces, I think, a lot of the...
I bet as you get older, that changes, though.
What do you mean?
In the sense that you manufacture the outcome you want and there aren't that many surprises. You're more the alchemist than the boy on the journey.
I think you can be both.
But you're kind of more one or the other, I think. So I just did this book, and inside of the book, I have this thing called the 17 Laws of Leadership. And the very first one is avoid finality.
Yeah.
This book was definitely a part of my development, but getting the pyramid has its own consequences also.
For sure.
And so you're never going to put your feet up and say, I won, or I've arrived, or I'm happy, or there's all these things that we try to achieve, that if we were just happy, or if we were just rich, or we're in,
Oh, yeah.
it's empty.
Yeah.
You just have to be what you are, and then
Yeah.
create what you want to create. But I think that's part of being an artist, is the joy is in the creation and the impact it has on others. It's not internal, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think maybe to your point, that's why I think controlling the outcome is not my favorite, because I like the idea, I think, but I also feel that when it becomes about controlling the outcome, the magic can of what's actually happening around me, when I think like that, for me, I lose that magic.
Well, in this scenario, I'm seeing you as a very powerful person that is creating magic for others. So if you're creating magic for others, you have to control the outcome.
So it's not reckless. Is that what you mean?
It's intentional. Like if you want to write a movie,
Yeah.
and you want that movie to have a certain impact on people, you have to, the casting,
yes.
the script, everything matters.
Yeah.
And if you spend more time there, then there's less surprises, because you're intentionally creating outcomes for others. So
Right.
it's that filling a need for others versus trying to figure out what you are or want, that sort of thing.
Yes, and I think these things often take a life of their own.
Oh, I'm old.
Like I have this.
How old are you?
I can't tell you.
Why?
It's a great
I'm
secret.
the one. I'm old. I'm the one that's not supposed to.
You don't even know how old I could be. I could be very old with just a great.
Okay, well, I'm 52. So.
Are you?
Yeah. So.
No. Drop the skincare routine.
I've had a lot of, changes.
Haven't we all?
Reinventions, I guess I would say.
I think that's beautiful. I would never have thought that.
Show me your
tattoo? Right. So I have this tattoo. It says Chaos Magic. And I got this a few years ago, but it's the idea that this feeling of chaos, this feeling of disruption of what is going on, is where the magic happens. Because you can't create something without nothing. So like, it's kind of this thought of controlling. I keep coming back to this idea of controlling the outcome, because I think I used to wrestle with it more in a more violent way, because to calm my anxiety, I would want to control the outcome. And then chaos magic was this idea of there's a beauty in chaos. There's a beauty in this feeling of like in The Alchemist, after he gets the first bit of luck, he gets robbed. So he now has no money to cross the desert and go to the pyramids. He's just screwed. And so initially it's this lamenting of, how am I going to get there? This chaos has occurred. This disruption has occurred. Then through the discipline of working in the glass shop, he meets some of the right people. He learns discipline. He's prepared now to go on his journey. And I had a phase that really hasn't quite ended, where I was very into punk music. I'm very rebellious, And I used to love punk music and still do so much, because I think it's this idea of disrupting the system. It's disruption. It's like, this is not working. We have to cause chaos. We have to create a new way for growth to come through. And I think that that's like, I don't really quite know where I went with that, because it came from an earlier thought that we had, but it's just this idea of like, usually the outcome takes on a life of its own if you're just there, I think, to receive the outcome. I don't know if that...
Well, if you're creating and you're learning, if you look at it like, just for an odd reference or an abstract reference, like if you're laying down music on a vinyl record, right? It has to cut the wax to put the music there, right?
Yes.
And so when we're learning, there's always this cutting that's going on that feels like chaos, because in a sense, what we knew before was wrong, right? Because we didn't know the thing that we're learning.
Yes.
And we were wrong up until we learned it. And that learning or that creating is chaos, because you're having to accept the fact or face the fact that you didn't know this thing that now you know, and now what do I do with this thing I know?
Yes.
Or I learned this thing, and you gave a really good example earlier with the pageant of you assumed that they were one way, and now that you're with these girls, no, they're completely, they're people with all kinds of different amazing qualities. And so now you have to do something with that knowledge, and you have to absorb it, you have to face it. So there's a chaos in that, right?
Yes.
But if you're the teacher, you're the one creating that in somebody else, you're creating the chaos. So you can experience the chaos or you can create the chaos. I can create an environment where I'm playing punk rock music that will feel chaotic. And if that's the environment I want people to be in, then I'm creating it.
Right. You are the alchemist, aren't you?
There's two. I'm also the one experiencing the chaos too.
Student of chaos.
It's there's just two different ways to look at it. But when you're a magician, the audience doesn't know what's going to happen. You do. So for them, it's easy for them to perceive things as chaos.
Right.
It's easy for you to tell them a story and take them on a journey, but you already know what the punchline is. Right? There's a great definition of magic is it's the initial and the final solution and the casualty between. Does that make sense? Like the casualty between is where the audience enjoys it.
Right.
You're the magician. You knew what you created the problem and you solved the problem. And Marcel Duchamp always said, there is no solution because there's no problem.
Right.
You're creating, even when you were saying the pain, when you push into the pain and the chaos.
You've created that.
You created it.
It's amazing what human beings do, isn't it?
And disappointing.
Right, but it's like you recognize realistically it could be so simple. And yet we attach meaning and all these things to it to give us life or to give us that, I think, especially as a creative, you have to feel the pinch and then make it an ouch to create art. There has to be a stimuli and something that you get out of that to create the art.
And you have to love being right there at that
you got to get into
tension,
it.
Right?
Yeah. I used to run from that. Probably I still do to a certain extent. But like now I'm like, wow, like that thing that happened gave me so much creativity to work out of. What a blessing that was.
I had a friend tell me this morning, he was asking me about, what do you think about, like, you should love yourself? Do you think you should love yourself?
Yes.
I know.
Really? You think you should hate yourself?
No, I think, like, why would I?
Shouldn't attach to yourself.
Let's say I want to date you, right? And so if you fall in love with me, are you falling in love with me or are you falling in love with the mask that I'm putting up?
I think it depends on how real you are with yourself.
Just in a really extreme abstract sense, would I want to date a girl that farted all the time and said the wrong thing or whatever? No, I wouldn't. I want the best version of her. I'm going to fall in love with a better, more refined version of her.
It's going to be hard.
And I'm going to pretend like I'm interested when I'm not. I'm going to behave myself in front of your parents. I'm going to do all these things. But
is that love?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a copy.
No, it's other people don't need to experience the worst part of us. There has to be some sort of mask.
Well, but what if you've worked? What if you?
First of all, you wouldn't want to hear everything I think.
But think about this.
I should curate just what I think.
Think about this. Sorry to cut you off, but I will forget this thought. I hope you'll forgive me. What if you loved yourself enough to get into the parts of you that you think are the worst, look at them, investigate them, refine them yourself, not for somebody else, but for you. There's parts of me that I'm like, Julia,
I 100% agree with what you're saying. I'm just going to change the word love to something else.
Okay.
Because I feel like love is forgiving the parts of you that aren't good. It's an expectation that you can't live up to, just like hate. You shouldn't hate yourself. I think what you should do is like yourself and accept the bad things, the bad parts of that you know you need to work on. Accept the fact that you're growing and constantly learning and have a little bit of a sense of humor about the things that you're not good at and be proud of the things that you are. But it's not hate and it's not love. It's just you need to like yourself.
I have to I hear you.
I think if I loved myself, I would be too much. It's too much. I'm
What's
not that
too
great.
much? Too much
I'm not
for
that
who?
great. I'm not that smart.
Too much for who? Loving yourself isn't about thinking that you're the best thing to ever be born onto the earth.
If I loved myself, that's what it would be.
Well,
Just
then I
me.
hope that you love yourself because I think you should take up that space.
I accept that I'm flawed. But if I loved myself, it would be too much.
But if you love someone, you love that they are flawed. You love fundamentally that they are a human being. If I meet somebody and they're so great, I'm turned off. Because what the fuck is that?
To my point.
I think true love, not a copy, not a mirage of love, truly, and this is why I avoided love for like 10 years, is because it is so terrifying to have someone actually see you, to actually be too much.
But that's my point, is you have no mask with yourself.
But the person that I love, I don't want them to have a mask with me.
I'm too flawed to love. I have too many issues.
And that is why you have to love yourself.
I like myself. I do like myself.
Good. I'm glad you like yourself.
But I have no ambition to love myself.
But would you allow somebody to love you? I think that's the question.
Yeah, for sure.
Really?
And I would love them. I love my fiance, and we have an incredible relationship.
Okay.
And the love grows deeper with the more experiences and the things we go through.
Okay, so you are seeing the deeper side of it.
She's beautiful and like way more, like she's got qualities I would never have.
But you know what? I imagine if we asked her what she thought of you, she would probably say something very reciprocal. She probably sees you and loves you for the things that you don't even see in yourself, maybe. That's love. I mean, imagine somebody...
I agree with that. I think that that's how it works, but I fundamentally, I don't have any ability to have a mask with what I really am if I'm being honest with myself. And I feel like if I was trying to love myself, I would start hiding things that I need to face. I need to be more honest than that. Like, I need to like myself, I need to root for myself, but I have to fundamentally understand that I got a lot of work to do.
That's beautiful. Do you think you're your own best friend?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Do you love your best friend?
I was an only kid. Like,
yeah.
I was alone. I talked to myself. Did you talk to yourself when you were...
Oh, I still talk to myself.
Yeah.
I have a whole running narrative of like, what the hell
Did you talk to yourself in Spanish?
It kind of depends on like the mood I'm in. If I'm feeling like I have a lot to say, it might come out in Spanish. But also, it's kind of this idea of like, who am I? Like, what is truly myself? I had that question for many years because I couldn't claim being Nicaraguan, but that's such a big part of who I am.
It's so fun when you say it.
Nicaragua.
You're almost rolling the R's.
It's very hard to roll the R in Nicaragua because it's a A. I would love to. I wish I could. Thank you. But it's so interesting, right? The self. But I think self-love, maybe the idea that I know for myself of love, I did think that I had to be perfect to be loved. And then I realized, like, if I actually love myself like I would love somebody else, I love people that are flawed or that think they're flawed. I love seeing human beings be human beings because it's beautiful.
I do too. There's beauty in the suffering and in the joy and all that. But just me internally, I don't think that is a healthy, leverageable thing because I have too much work to do. There's no reason for me to need that. I need to accept and like myself and root for myself. But, there's a lot of things I need to work on. And I got a lot to learn still, right? If you just think about what there is out there to know.
We all have a lot to work on, I would imagine.
And like you were saying, we kind of live in a little bit of a time of people being polarized, like, and not realizing that we're way more similar than we are different.
Oh, we're so similar. Isn't it amazing when you like meet someone to discuss your life stories or you just start talking and your life story comes out or something to that extent? And you're like, have I ever had an original experience? Like, truly, it's cool.
No, it is.
Because we really separate ourselves,
How many people have you given this book to? We never got to your uncle's notes.
You know what's funny about my uncle's notes? And I'm so grateful that I still have my uncle because his notes will always be with me. He's also a poet, so his notes are very poetic. But I gave the copy of the book he gave me to my friend Justin. Justin, who was one of my first friends when I moved to LA, Justin worked in fashion. He was a model, and now he's directing films. And I haven't seen Justin in many years, but obviously because of Instagram, I can kind of check in on him. One of the most interesting people I think I've ever met. Like just a beautiful spirit. And I remember looking up to him so much when I first moved here because he was so free and such a freedom of expression. And I gave him that book and I've never seen it since. So he has my book and my uncle's notes. And now he's a film director.
No?
No. But I've probably given that book to maybe like 4 or 5 people. But I don't even remember who and I don't remember where. I'm sure I gave out a copy or 2 in London. I've given 2 out in LA. And probably I gave one out somewhere else. I just recently, about 3 weeks ago, gave away my newest copy to a friend of mine who, I think I can say this, just got out of prison. And
why couldn't you say that?
Well, I never want to give people's details away.
What did they go to prison for? That's more fascinating.
Well, that is a fascinating thing for sure. An interesting thing about how we're really not so different is my friend who I just recently gave the copy to, when someone tells you something like that, it's so easy to attach like, oh, they're this because they're this. And it's like, well, look at yourself. Maybe you didn't do what they did, but you've probably thought about it.
Or if you were put in the situation they were.
Who knows?
Have you ever watched Soft White Underbelly on YouTube?
Yes.
Like
breaks my heart.
Yeah, but if I was born into some of those situations, I can't say that I would turn out different. Like if that's all you know and that's your context and the trauma and the abuse and the pain and
isn't it? It's fascinating.
I was lucky.
Right. I think that's kind of
I had a parent that loved me and told me they loved me and built up my self-esteem. Yeah, judging in a sense is kind of not looking at the real picture of that old saying, if you walked a day in their shoes, if you had to carry their experience or their trauma, you might do worse. You might have murdered somebody.
I know. Well, luckily my friend
wasn't murder?
Didn't do that.
We'll get there. What?
No. He didn't do anything that...
Embezzlement?
No. But what's funny about my friend, and he was in prison for a long time.
What's funny about him is embezzlement, I think. Tax?
Unfortunately,
avoidance?
no. But what's interesting because when I made music and when I first moved to LA, I fell into a group of people that now,
armed
several
robbery?
years later. No, one is on death row for murder.
Ouch.
Yeah. Oh, it was an ouch. Because I was like, to your point, you realize you connect with people on a level of friendship because you see something in them or you feel something in them that feels like home or it feels like a friend, right? But you sometimes, because you're young, don't realize what life has already done in their life. Like, to your point about having a parent that loved you. I was blessed with the same thing. But there was something in that friend that's now on death row that at the time, there was a innocence to them and there was something about them that made me feel like this is a safe person for me to be a friend with. And then that all changed. We all went our separate ways. I went my way, they all went their way. And that's when everything changed. And I think that's kind of one of the things about when I was talking about what I've learned about trying to live in a space of love, which sounds very new agey, I think, to some, but truly, if I have the ability and the resources to learn my lessons and become a better person, I better take that opportunity because there's other people that I love and know that didn't get that opportunity because life hit them with a 2x4 or whatever the case. And
you also, like you were explaining earlier, you've experienced somebody walking in the room and having that energy and how it changes you. Mm-hmm. And so whether it's new agey or not, it is a real experience as a human.
It is.
That positivity and openness creates positivity and openness.
And it doesn't mean that we're like, oh, life is amazing all the time. Because there's days when I called my mom 2 days ago and I was like, Mom, what is the point? Blah, blah, blah. But I think if you can just try and be in a space or like work through those lessons, it's like it's profound what it can do for the it's such a deeper thing, like the soft white underbelly, the prison, all of that. But I gave my friend who recently left prison the copy of my book. And I will tell you, this friend of mine is one of the people in my life that I know that if I'm having a bad day, I can always talk to them about life. And that's a gift. Like, it's just so true that you just don't know, we're not really separate from each other. We're all just on this life and time, especially in this year, this time of life. Like, we're all together in this. We're all here for a reason of some kind, of some contribution.
We talked about this book and how it changed your life and how you were in the past. You kind of, because you were going to do this, you recently just analyzed your experience with the book, right? So it's fresh. I would be really curious to sit down 10 years from now again and see how it changes.
10 years. Fuck.
That's exciting.
It's exciting. And you know what? Not to sound in any way, because I don't think of this as a bad thing, but I just pray that God gives me, the universe gives me, the higher power gives me another 10 years of just growth and life. Because I thank the good Lord above that I am not in the same place I was 10 years ago.
Well, I will tell you.
And it was when I read this book.
You don't need the good Lord or anything. You're a badass and you can create whatever you want.
Yes. I think there's a bit of divine luck, though, that comes with it, just like in the book.
You're creating the luck. You already told that story.
I actually have the pyramids tattooed on my arm.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I have 3 pyramids. I designed it.
From the book?
Yeah, it's not, I don't actually, I think in the book there is this illustration. I don't know if I'll find it. I have the pyramids. I do believe there's an illustration, but it's the 3 pyramids and the North Star, I think, above it. I don't think I'll be able to find it, but I have it tattooed on my arm because all of my tattoos are my life lessons, including Jimi Hendrix, and him less of a lesson though. But that I think is the one. So every time I look, I like keep moving forward. I think that's a big thing, is you just keep moving forward.
Yeah.
No matter if you don't know where your pyramids are, you just keep going.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
This was fun.